Hello there, and welcome to the Angry Rooster Creations YouTube channel. My channel hasn't been very active. I've had it for a year and a half, 2 years at this point. I've only made a handful of videos, and they were pretty. They were experiments to say the least. Doing some animations and things, but I thought it would take some time to actually start making some more practical videos. If nothing else, just to get some content on my channel, but also to make some videos that offer some different perspective on things, such as what you see here on the table. What we have are a couple of Lamy Safari fountain pens here. This one in Pina Colada, which is a limited edition. This one in yellow, which is a standard color. And then a bunch of pens on the left that look like Lamy Safaris, but these are indeed actually not. They are Jinhao's. These are Jinhao 619s. There is another version of this pen called a Jinhao 599, which is pretty much functionally identical, I do believe, except that the clip, instead of being this wire clip that you see on here, is a stamped flat sheet metal clip with a little window punched out to sort of give the look without actually having this wire clip. Obviously this being done to make it look more like your Lamy Safari, and in that regard it does look like your Lamy Safari. It has the same sort of grip and feed section, the same sort of shape to the grip section. The barrels are pretty much designed after one another. This one's designed after the Lamy. You've got your little ring here between the section and the barrel. The feeds are very similar. The nibs are very similar. In fact, the nibs are interchangeable between a Safari and the Jinhao here. Though the construction of the feed itself is not actually identical to the Safari. The kind of sort of engineering and the two-piece feed that goes in the Safari is a lot more sophisticated than what's in this pen. But functionally, as far as holding the nib, the shape and all, it's functionally pretty similar. Now, I will say one thing of note when you're looking for these pens. When you see the 599s for sale, the ones that have the flat stamped sheet metal clip, you'll actually see them in pictures, then they'll show them capped. The 699s, anytime you see them listed, all 5 of the pens, because these come in, like when I bought these, they came as 5 pens for $10. You'll actually see them listed without having the cap on the pens. Now, I don't know if that has something to do with they're afraid that if they list these with that wire clip, if they'll catch a lawsuit or cease and desist or something from Lamy. I don't know, but I have noticed that the 619s are always listed. They do not show the cap, but the cap is this Lamy correct, if you will, clip. Now, when you look at this, and I think a lot of people will look at that as far as price goes, you are looking at, when I bought these on Amazon, it was $10 for 5 pens, or it might have been $11, but it's roughly $2 per pen. And that comes with a converter in the pen. When you're looking at your Lamy Safaris, they, over the last, they've changed prices a couple times. Obviously, everything's going up in price. But as of today, the last time I looked at a Safari, so this is March the 9th of 2025, the basic colors, like the standard color Safaris, are $29. And to get the Z28 or Z27 converter to put in your Safari, it's going to generally be like another $7. So you're looking at $36 total for a Safari. So, looking at it as a pure monetary thing, if you're just, taking a kind of passing glance at these, you're like, hey, why would I spend $36 $6 to get the whole kit and caboodle here, and not just go and get 5 pins for $10. I could have 15 pins for the same price with one of these Lamys. Well, let's go into that. Because there are some there's some differences here. One of those is the component quality is a little different. Now, the wire that's in the clip is slightly thinner than the wire that's on the Lamy. I did actually check this with calipers. I would do it on camera, but it's a small enough difference, it doesn't really warrant it. There was like a 5/1000ths difference in the diameter of the wire, which is just under the thickness of 2 sheets of paper, notebook paper stacked on top of each other. So that's pretty irrelevant. They're both very strong, very springy. I will say they are less likely to get sprung or bent outward as a stamped sheet metal clip on pretty much any given pin. Now, some people, that might be up for debate. Some people might not like that. I know some people hate the design of the Lamy clip, but as far as functionality of what a pocket clip is supposed to do, it's probably one of the better designed pin clips out there. They're stiff. They're easy to get something, to get clipped onto something, whether it's the edge of a book, the hem on the pocket of a pair of blue jeans, because not all clips will actually clip over the pocket hem on jeans, or anything else, the spiral rings on a notebook, which is how I usually have my Safari set up. And because I draw, I sketch, and this yellow Safari goes everywhere I go, and it stays clipped in the rings of a ring-bound sketchbook all the time. So that's not a big major issue there. Same thing goes to the nibs. The nib is slightly thinner, and when I say slightly, it's also a minuscule amount. I did put a caliper on both of them. The thickness of this nib is about 13/1000ths of an inch. The thickness of the Lamy nib was 17/1000, so that's a 4/1000ths difference. That's almost the thickness of a piece of paper, so negligible. Now, there is differences in the plastics here. The Jinhaos, they kind of, not only they feel and look a bit like a pen in their price point. It's probably not going to show up on this camera, but there is a different sheen to the plastic. Like, even without handling the pens, you can kind of look at the Safari sitting beside these on the table, and you can, on a close look, you can kind of just see that there is a difference in the plastic compounds. But also, as you can see me doing here, the walls of this plastic is a little thinner, but the plastic itself is not as stiff, not as rigid, I guess I should say. It doesn't, like I said, it does not feel the same as the Safari. You can take the Safari off and you can squeeze this and really might be able to get it to move a little bit, but it's not like these cheaper Jinhaos. But once again, it's a $2 price point. What should you really expect for that? Some corners, some things will be done differently for the price. Now, one of the things that is different is that when you take the barrel off here, and I'm going to bring this up later when I get into the cons, this is a single start thread, meaning it takes a lot longer for this to, thread on the barrel, which, how often are you taking the barrel on and off? But there are some things that are, that does cause a little bit of a cosmetic issue that I'll get into in a minute. On a Lamy, the barrel threads on with a double start thread. So when you go to put this on, if you start to thread it on with the flat unembossed side and screw it on, you'll see Lamy. If you do it the other way, so I start screwing it on with the embossed threads up, you'll actually have the unembossed threads here. So the reason being is you actually have 2 consecutive threads on here, or 2 stacked threads on a double start thread. So you have one of the threads starts, I don't know if you're going to be able to see if it starts there. You'll actually have another thread start here. So what that does is essentially, if it's the same thread pitch, the parts being threaded together will advance twice as fast. But also for each turn of, for however much of a degree of turn, the thread advances faster and tightens quicker. And like once I said, here in a minute when I start getting to the cons of how these are, the cons of these pins, I'll address how that causes a cosmetic issue. The next thing is here is we're going to talk about the differences in cap construction. So you're probably not going to be able to see down in here too well. Oh, blind myself with this light. But the Lamy cap has... Okay, there we go. You can see down inside the cap liner. The way this works, this thing that looks like a Phillips head is not a screw. This is a snap-in button that has a little plug on the bottom that snaps in. You can see the tail end of that plug through the cap liner, and it goes down between the... it goes down and kind of traps this wire clip in there, and that's how the Lamy cap is assembled. On these Jinhaos, I'm going to use this black one. I'll tell you why about that in a minute. On these Jinhaos, if I can get to look down in here, yeah, there we go. You'll see that there is a screw. Well, there we go. There is a screw down inside of there. Well, having a little bit different. You can see it. There's a Phillips head screw down inside there that threads into the top of the finial here and holds the clip on and holds the cap liner in. That is also going to cause, so that's a little bit, you put a Phillips head screwdriver in there. You can unscrew that. You can remove the cap, remove the cap liner, remove the finial, remove the clip, if you needed to do so. However, that also causes a few technical issues, and I'm going to get into. So now that I've kind of gone through the features of the Safaris and the features of the 619 here, I'm going to go through some of the issues with these 619 pins. Now, earlier I said not having a double start thread on the barrel to cap join, or barrel to section joint, would cause issues. To tighten this barrel on, you actually have to get more degrees of rotation to get the barrel snug and tight. Well, one of the things that causes an issue with is on most of these pins. I don't know if you're going to see it, but here's the center ridge on the section here. Notice where the flat is on the barrel. You can see that. See the center of this and how far off the ink window is? On all of these pins, the barrel section is not, and you can actually see the tabs there on the converter are showing in the ink window. The converter, like the tab that holds the converter there, is showing in the ink window. You can even see here, the center of the section, you can see how off that is. Now this is a cosmetic issue. It does not change the function of the pin, but on all 5 of these pins, the only one where that actually lines up decently is this purple pin. So that is a cosmetic flaw on all but one of these pins that I have. Okay, the Lamys, both of my Lamys, and I guess anybody that watches this who maybe has a Lamy or has seen a Lamy, they line up great. They line up, I'm not going to say every Lamy's perfect. I've not seen every Lamy Safari, but they line up great. And like I said, part of that is because it's a double start thread, you can use less degrees of rotation. So even if some reason the tolerances are a little off, you're going to have essentially less over tightening, less over torquing, if you will, that's going to cause that to misalign. Whereas, like say on these, this is another issue. If you slightly back this off to correct that, this barrel is loose. To get those flats, this barrel is loose. This will just eventually unthread itself. So you have to tighten it till it gets snug, and those flats are no longer in line with the feed, or with the section, I mean. So that is a cosmetic flaw. Whether or not that's important to you, you know, once again, it's a $2 pen. Does it change the way it writes? No, it doesn't. So there's that. Now, another issue I'm going to bring up. Earlier when I showed the inside of this cap, I showed this black one to show that Phillips head screw. There's a reason for that. On all these other 4 pins, there is some degree of corrosion in that cap screw. On this purple pin, unfortunately, it is the worst. And I'm going to see if I can get a good look at this on the camera so you can see it. Yeah, I don't know if you can see down in there. But it's actually pretty crusty down in there. Like, pretty nasty. And I don't know why this pen has never, like, burped out ink and filled the cap. But that is pretty corroded and gross up in there. And that's not ideal. So, now, what I'm probably going to do is end up taking a Phillips head screwdriver, trying to get that out of there, cleaning up with some Scotch-Brite, and putting some paint on that screw. To be honest, I think what they should have done would have been to have got a brass machine screw. And used a brass machine screw here, because moisture from the ink would not corrode a brass machine screw. And I know some people are like, well, brass is probably too expensive to put in a cheap pen. That's not so, because this is a Jinhao 82, and if you remove the finial cap, it has a machined brass piece that actually holds the clip on, and if you look up inside the cap, there's actually a brass nut down inside. I'm probably going to be, but there's a brass nut down inside that secures that. And this pen, price point, is not much different than this pen. I'll come back to that in a minute. But that would have alleviated that issue and prevented that corrosion of the screw inside this cap. That's not ideal. Now, there is another issue with this, and that is if that screw does not seal pretty well in here, and it does not seal up any air gaps, your pen can dry out. And I can tell you with these 5 pens, because I originally bought these when I got a bunch of ink samples to use as just cheap pens to fill up with all different types of inks and write ink samples and things. These pens tend to want to dry out. They tend to dry out. If you leave these sitting with ink in them, they dry out. It's not ideal. Not at all ideal. And another issue that can also exacerbate that, this probably is the wrong one to use. Yeah, that one is. Let me grab one of these other pens. So on some of these pens, when you go to put the caps on them, if you put the cap on, it'll kind of click. And it feels like it's snug sometimes. But sometimes it does not fully seat. Because there's kind of a catch, and you put the cap on, and the cap's snug, but it's not fully seated. Whereas if you take the actual Safari, you know, it's on off. So you can actually have these pens, put the cap on them, feel like they've seated, and they're not actually fully seated. The front end of the pen here is not actually clipped into the cap liner, because if you've seen a Lamy or one of these, you'll know that that little lip clips into the cap liner, and that's where the cap actually seals on the pen. Which is one of the problems. With all these pens, this blue one here has always given me quite a bit of issue. Has given me quite a bit of issue. From when I first inked these up, this one had flow issues. It didn't really, it never really wanted to write. It always hard started. I couldn't keep it to constantly flow. I did have to do some adjustments to the nib, to the tines on the nib, and I did accidentally bend the nib, which leads me, when I was trying to adjust the tines. Now I've adjusted tines on other nibs, trying to, adjust display this way. You put a little piece of shim stock in there and you pry out, and things to kind of get the tines to spread a bit, so they'll flow a little bit better when you're trying to tune them. And leads me to believe that the nibs that are standard these are not quite as resilient as a Lamy nib. But then again, if you buy a Lamy nib by itself, it's $18, around $18, depending on which style of Lamy nib you get. So the whole pen here is $2. But this one, out of the 5 that I got, one of them really didn't write. But it's got another issue. I did tune it up so where it does write now. After I accidentally bent it, I bent it back and got it to work. But it's experienced another problem. This pen currently has ink in it, but I want to show you something. I have not traveled with this pen. I have not went through elevation changes with this pen. This pen has been inked up and it's been sitting on my desk in a horizontal manner. This pen has leaked into the cap, but also you will see the cap seal, which is supposed to seal right here, failed, and the ink has ran down the cap. This ring, for those that don't know, is not an O-ring. It's a hard plastic ring. It's the same on this as it is on the Safari. This does not seal. So, if you were to be carrying this thing around in your pocket and it did that, through walking, moving, and doing things, and if this is shaking around, there is nothing to prevent that ink to continue down onto the barrel and out of the cap. That is a big problem. Like, that's not good. That's not good at all. Because the cap does not seal back here. And in fact, on a few of these, there's, like this yellow one, I don't know if that's going to show on the camera, but there actually is some wiggle in play. Like, the purple one's pretty tight. This one's so-so. The orange one here probably has the most play. Oops. And so, that's not very confidence-inspiring on this pen. Now, I have had my Lamy, it does sound a burp sometimes. You like to see there's quite a bit of ink here. That's because I live on the edge of a plateau. Most of the time I have to go to the store, have to go to work, what have you. I actually go through a pretty good drop in elevation. Sometimes enough that you actually have to equalize pressure on your ears. Your ears can pop. Not every time, sometimes. So yeah, this pen does kind of spit up a little bit in the cap because the pressure changes. That's to be expected. It's never bad. It's just mostly, it's nib creep is what it looks like. Occasionally you pull it out. It might be a little bit inky here, so you have to take a little piece of a tissue or something and just wipe some of that ink off. It's not the end of the world. But my Lamys have never done this. And like I said, this happen sitting on my desk. So, not very confidence inspiring. So all in all, okay, if you're looking at these, and I know I went over this more because the review is on this, I didn't really go into extreme great detail on the Safari. Doodlebud, I believe it was Doodlebud. Yes, Doodlebud has a very good breakdown where he kind of goes more through the engineering and like breaks down a Safari to a molecular level. I would encourage you to go watch his video. He has a very good video on the Safari. I can't do it justice, so I'm not going to try and do a video on the Safari. And there's tons of people out there that have videos on Safaris. But what I'm trying to get at is, this is not a Safari for $2. This is a look-alike of a Safari for $2. And frankly, the quality of these, the 619s and the 599s, is the quality of a $2 pen. Now, personally speaking, I would not buy more of these. And I don't think that they're really that good of a deal. And I'm going to get into that here. Okay? This is a Jinhao 992. You can get these pens off of Amazon for $13, I think, when I bought these, for 6 pens. So a little bit, just barely more expensive, but a little bit more expensive than this. And actually, this one's a little bit mismatched. Let me grab a different one from this set. So this guy. What you will note here is this is sort of that Jinhao size 5 nib. Okay? And it comes with a converter. And this converter is a nicer converter. And now that I mentioned the converter, I realized there was something a minute ago I was going to talk about these pens that is an issue in the converter department. I'll touch that now. But it is got a nicer converter. And another thing that's really nice about these pens is when you need to clean this pen, you just simply grab the nib and feed like that, and the nib and feed pulls out. Like so. That easy. And I want you to look at the veins here on the air interchange on the feed. They're nice and straight, which is pretty nice. Makes cleaning these out pretty easy. Okay? Makes cleaning these out nice and easy. The other thing, actually before I go into that, this nib and feed section actually unscrews. And that, you can actually buy these in all different nib sizes. Now, I don't believe there's aftermarket nibs available for the 992s. And the Jinhao 82, which actually uses this same screw in, screw out nib and feed section. But you can get 3 of these nibs for like, 3 of these nib feed sections for like $9. And they're available in extra fine, fine, medium, and possibly a broad. And you can get a Fude bent nib for these, because this particular 982 that I have right here is a Fude nib. It's a bent nib. So all of that is possible with these. Now, obviously, you can't use a Lamy nib in this like you can with this guy here. But all things considered, and these, I wouldn't say they have the best amount of, they have the best longevity of ink when sitting, stored, without the ink drying in the pen. But it is better than these right here, these kind of Lamy lookalikes. So if I was looking at pens in this price range, I would rather grab the pack of these 992s. But I said that I just reminded myself of another issue with these pens here. Let me show you what that is. Now, the way this is seated in here, this converter, if I pull this out, you will notice it is not all the way to the bottom of the converter. Why is that? Because up inside of here, where you actually have the little stem that would pierce a cartridge, it actually goes far enough into that converter that it hits the head of the piston. The problem is, when you push this thing, if you try to push this all the way to the bottom, you'll notice as I turn this, I don't know if you saw that, but I need to retract that piston. Yeah, that's not the tightest fit, and if you're not paying attention, when you go to fill this, if you crank that all the way to the bottom where the piston bottoms out, you will actually push the section off the pin, and then your converter is in there quite loose. And you can still fill the pen even with that converter is loose. And so you could once again put this thing in your pocket, be walking around with it, and yeah, you could have this pen lose its converter, potentially, because you unknowingly unseated the converter while filling the pen. And that is an inky disaster waiting to happen, because if you know, with the Safari and this, those ink windows are cutouts in the barrel. You also have vents in the back of the barrel. This does not seal. If your converter came out of the pen while you're carrying it, ink is just going to leak out of this, and that's going to be a nightmare that you don't want to deal with. Also, I will of note, on the cap issue here, So this one has got a little bit of some ink down in it. I need to clean this cap out particularly, but inside the cap, you do have a plastic thread that goes into a nut, which is not 100% ideal, but you do not have a steel fastener inside the cap liner, so you don't have to worry about a screw rusting up in the top of the cap like you do on this 619. So once again, not ideal. Now, let's talk about the 82. Personally, out of the Jinhao pens that I have, these are my favorite. Once again, they have the same little feed assembly here. The sections are not interchangeable between these pens. The caps aren't. It is a different style of pen. But this pen, if you buy them on Amazon, I think it's like 2 of them for 12 bucks or something, or 2 of them for like $13.99, so like $7 a pen. But if you're okay with ordering directly from the AliExpress, anywhere from $2.80 to like $4 for a single Jinhao 82. And while yes, that is potentially twice the value of this pen, twice the cost of this pen, the actual value, construction, and overall quality of the 82 is over double that of this pen. So if I was looking at these two options, I would absolutely go with this guy, with the 82. Well, let's have another option, but maybe you want that Lamy nib compatibility. Maybe instead of paying $36 for one Safari here, you want to spend, $36 on two nibs, 2 Lamy nibs, and then one on a cheap pen to put those in. Enter the Jinhao 80. It also has the Lamy nib. And while, yes, the piston does bottom out when you're filling this, because the piston is a real tight, I don't know if you heard that pop there, that little kind of suction cup pop, is a real tight fit in the section, you will not accidentally unseat the converter while filling this pen. The overall construction of this pen is nicer. And while I will say this, with the 80, it does dry out quicker than some of my other pens, it was better than this because that cap liner up in there, I don't know if you could see it, if I can get a view down in there, it's a solid cap liner with a little plastic plug that goes into the finial. There's no metal fastener in there to rust, and just overall, I personally believe this is a better pen. So, all things considered, if you're in the position, you're like, I want a Safari, but I don't want to spend 36 bucks. If your idea is to buy these and kind of sit them on a desk and look at them, they're okay. But if you're thinking you're getting the same quality level of a Safari for $2, you're not. But to put it into better perspective, if you're just looking for a cheap pen, I just want something cheap that works and writes, the 992, which is available in a 6-pack, the 82, which are available in pairs or individually, the 80, which is available individually, and at the time of writing this, I believe on AliExpress, these are $3.80. Same thing, $3.80, $2.80 to $4. If you're got more than $10 on your order, you get free shipping. You have to wait longer. So not all that much in price difference, but the quality difference between the 619 and these other Jinhao pens, it's pretty significant to the point I would avoid, or I would say you should probably avoid this model. It has problems. I think it's just that they were trying to hit that market niche of people who wanted the Safari, so that they made compromises to the overall quality and function of the pen to get the form factor. Now, I know I've been talking and stuff and I haven't written anything. I will attempt to just do a little writing sample for you real quick, because this is a pen to review, and at the end of the day, people's probably going to want to see that. This is the only one that I have that's actually inked up. It's inked with Noodler's Bay State Concord Grape. I know my video quality here isn't the best, but Okay, that's another thing you should note. These all came with extra fine nibs. I don't know if I can't remember that they're available with anything else. All of these are available with extra fines except this guy. The 992s come with fine nibs, and I have not seen them listed. They probably are, but I've not seen them listed with anything other than a fine nib. But like I said, nibs and feed units are interchangeable with the 82. So if you got one of these with an extra fine nib, you can pull the extra fine nib, put it in this guy. This dude here, extra fine, and this 80 here, also an extra fine. But, you know, so... Oh, I just inked you and you're hard starting on me. Jinhao how 619 extra fine. Okay, this is probably not going to show up the best with noodlers. Bay State. Concord. Oh, yeah, spelled that wrong. I'm not used to cursive writing. Great. The A and the P became one word. Now, when these do write, like I said, this one, I don't know why it had that one hard start. It hasn't been doing that. This is the only one that did it consistently. When these do write, they write pretty well. They are indeed an extra fine. Now, I don't really have much to compare them to. Actually, this has got a different ink in it. This has got Heart of Darkness, but dude, there's Heart of Darkness. Are you serious right now? You're gonna do this to me too? Okay. Actually, I need to check. I might be running out of ink in this pen. Not that's gonna show up. It's roughly equivalent to the line width of the Lamy Safari. I'm not really gonna get down and throw a steel rule on these or try to caliper them. I don't have any kind of a microscope to compare or anything, but it's roughly around the same. It is an extra fine. It's not a Japanese extra fine. It's more of a European extra fine, I would say. Like I said, pretty comparable to the Safari. It does reverse write. And there is a little bit of variation in that reverse writing. I don't know how well that's going to show on camera. So, as far as the functionality, it's alright, but when you consider that the issues I've had, there you go, with that cap not really wanting to seat very easy, with things like that, and with the drying out, the dry times on these pens, I don't really recommend this particular pen model. Because I think there are just better options out there from even just Jinhao, let alone the, and then you have things with the converter unseating itself, you know, that issue that's annoying. And actually I didn't pull the feed on these, but that's another thing, to be honest. I would not do this as my Leatherman, I would not do this with my Lamy, but with this pen, to get the feed out, you really have to almost take a pair of pliers to get the feed out of these if you want to clean them. And then, on these particularly, I was never able to do the tape thing to pull this nib off. I was having to put something behind here and push after removing the feed to get the nib out. So, you know, the tolerances and things here are not what you'd expect on a Safari. And the overall function and some of the issues I've had with the pen are less than adequate when you consider other offerings by Jinhao in roughly the same price range that are better pens. So overall, in my personal opinion, I would avoid these. I mean, I've already got them, so I'm going to use them for what I originally bought them for, but they're not that great. There are far better pens out there, and you would be happier grabbing one of these other pens. So anyways, this video went way longer than I intended it to. But, you know, as I wouldn't really say it's necessarily a long-term review. I did not use these pens extensively, but I have used them quite a bit. This isn't just an open box where I'm showing you first impressions. Having used these and having used other Jinhao pens, and having used a Lamy Safari extensively, just trying to go into, you know, what my thoughts are on this. If you kind of want to just collect these and have them to look at with all the different colors, you know, maybe they're worth it for that. But as far as, like I said, the all functionality, how the pen works, the quality, the construction, and other issues with it, I would avoid these. And just generally speaking, I haven't used every Lamy Safari clone out there, because there are certainly a bunch, and there are some that have a more correct Lamy style finial cap situation. But generally speaking, if you're looking at something like a Lamy Safari, it is more expensive. It is $36 if you get it with the converter, you know, the converter and pen together. But in the world of fountain pens, a lot of people, you know, like the real, I don't know if you're saying pen purist, pen snobs, I don't know how you want to say that. I want to be too, I don't want to be too mean with the way I say that, but people who are, you know, big fountain pen collectors who collect a lot of the more high-end pens, the Safari is usually looked down on as sort of being a cheap or an entry-level pen. So even though it is more expensive, for the differences in that you're going to get with the various knockoffs of the pens out there versus what you actually get with the Safari, this is going to be, like, if you really want something that looks like a Safari, just buy a Safari. You know, just save up some money and buy the Safari, or just skip this pen style altogether and go with something that's, you know, maybe a little bit more classic in style, that's also affordable, that works a lot better. Alright, and with that, I'm going to close out this roughly 42-minute video. And if you actually watched this long, I thank you for actually watching this long. I should have probably worked on my script and got this down a little easier, a little quicker, but I sort of, you know, nerded out, went off in the weeds, and made this video a lot longer than what it should have been. So, with that all being said, thank you for watching. Please like and throw a comment down in the comment section. It'd be much appreciated. And if you like what you see, consider subscribing. It would be nice to actually grow my channel. I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of these videos because I don't have an extensive pen collection. I've showed you most of the pens that I have. But, you know, I will make some other videos, make some videos about some inks and things that are coming. This was sort of a test video for this kind of a format and but making a video like this, because I've never done anything like this, so it's my first. I had to start somewhere. So anyways, like I said, thanks again, and bye.